Okay, for our first example of checking the conditions, what we have is a proportion of students. We know that we are told that the proportion of students in a high school in the US who have a part time job is 0.25. So, about one fourth of students have a part time job in the US high schoolers. An administrator at a local high school suspects that the proportion of students at her school who have a part time job is less than the national figure. She wants to carry out a significance test at the alpha equals 0.05 significance level of the null hypothesis. Remember, it's boring, no change. The true proportion at her high school is 25%, or the alternative, the true proportion at her high school is less than 25%. And we saw that because she thought that her school is less than the national figure. And so that's why we have a less than there. So we can even notice less than. P is the true proportion of all students at her school who have a part-time job. And that's what we want to determine. So the administrator selects a random sample of 200 students. That's the sample size. Notice it also says random. That's going to be quite important for us. From a large school, and finds that 39 of them have a part-time job. We want to check to see if the conditions are met. So let's go through the three conditions. The first condition is random. Do we know that the sample was random? We do. It actually told us in the problem. There was a random sample of 200 students from the school, and the school was the population of interest. So we can just say random sample of 200 students from the school. That's great. That's what we want for random. Next, we want to check the 10% rule. This is a little bit trickier for this question. And so the 10% rule says that n has to be less than 0.1 n. So if we check that for this problem, lowercase n is the 200. That's our sample size. So we know that lowercase n is 200. That's the sample size. Well, 200 is less than 0.1 n. Feel free to use your calculator. To get uppercase n by itself, we have to divide by 0.1 on both sides. And 200 divided by 0.1 is 2,000, less than n. Or I can rewrite that as n is greater than 2,000. Well, I have to assume it does say that this is a large school. I have to make the assumption that the school has at least 2,000 students. Large is not specific enough for me to be sure that I have 200 students, so I don't, or 2,000 students in total at the whole school. So I'm going to make the assumption. I'm going to assume that the large high school has at least 200 students. Sorry, not 200, has at least 2,000. That's the population, has to be at least 2,000 students. Okay. And let's check number 3. The third condition is the large counts. I need a large enough sample, and the large enough sample is in relation to P naught. P naught is the proportion that we're testing against. And that's the proportion that should be in the null hypothesis. What we want to know is true or not. So P naught is 0.25. And if you look above in the table where we wrote what this condition is you should multiply n times P naught. Well, n, remember, is 200. 200 times 0.25 is 50. And the condition is that this must be greater than or equal to 10. That's what our condition above says. 50 is great. It's greater than or equal to 10. Great. We're done. We also have to check that n times 1 minus P naught is greater than or equal to 10. Well, n times 1 minus P naught is 200 times 1 minus 0.25, which is 200 times 0.75, which is 150. and 150 is also greater than or equal to 10. So this condition is met. Check there, and we're going to assume that the school has at least 2,000 students. And most large high schools in the U.S. do have at least 2,000 students, so we should be safe there. And so I've met the conditions to perform the significance test.